Okay. So I start now the last talk. He is here to share his knowledge and experience with us. He is a Bhavana Society board member, and he is a Dhamma teacher too. He's conducting meditation classes in Great Washington area. In Washington, Bihar also you have a class every Tuesday.
Twice a week, Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday. Twice. So he's practicing Dhamma as well as he's a very good Dhamma teacher. So I invited him to share his knowledge and experience with our devotees. So you have that wonderful opportunity. I would like to invite Robert in this opportunity, share your knowledge. Thank you very much. So enjoy the time.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for inviting me, Bhante. Thank you all. I assume some of you don't know who I am, so I thought I'd start off with a little bit of a introduction. As Bhante said, I've been teaching at the Washington Buddhist Vihara for a very long time, almost 20 years, on a weekly basis. And one topic that I love to talk about is the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, respect for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And I like to surprise people that it's one of the deepest, most profound teachings. Because everyone knows that we begin chanting Buddha Dhamma Sangha, we chant the characteristics, and we often use it as a prelude to go on to a Dhamma talk, somewhat deeper talk or something like that. It's something we pass over. But I want to show a different side to this notion of respect. And I think maybe this word respect, vandana, it might be a little bit not alive for us, not living. And so one thing I wanted to spend some time with you before I began today was to really touch in to what it means to me, and to maybe open up to a different way of looking at respect from a different point of view. And because of this late hour, because we've been here all day, I also thought I wanted to bring in even more aliveness. And I wanted to introduce something from a different perspective, a different way of looking at the Dhamma to sort of wake us up a little bit. And this is a good technique to learn and master in our meditation practice. As we all know, our meditation practices are quite long. I've been meditating for over 40 years, teaching the Dhamma for 20, and the playfulness, the ingenuity, and the creativity to be able to look at an old problem in a new way is incredibly powerful in teaching. And this is what I wanted to share with you today. And one approach that I wanted to take was, I was reflecting on the humor of the Buddha. Once you open up to a very subtle and respectful and noble humor of the Buddha, you see it everywhere in all his teachings. And it's actually an important principle. The Buddha praised his first disciple of ultimate wisdom, Sariputta. He said, he gave 6 ways, characteristics of defining the wisdom of Sariputta. And the third one was hasapanyo bhikkhave sariputto. He praised Sariputta as having what I could translate as laughter wisdom. Now that's surprising, right? All the other 5 characteristics of these 6 types of Sariputta's wisdom, we have great Dhamma teachings on all their meanings, but there are almost no teachings directly on this hasapanya. This ha, remember Pali is a onomatopoetic language. It sounds like we say ha 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 in English, right? Well, so they did too. Everyone, it's a biological expression of humor, ha. And so the word laughter, hasa, hasapanya. So laughter, wisdom. He praised Sariputta for this wisdom. And this is what I wanted to share with you today. And it's very subtle, and it takes a sort of subtle approach. And so I wanted to start with basics, with the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and build up to that towards the end of the talk. And so I asked you, because I want this to be interactive, when I'm talking, please, I'm inserting myself into this talk and my experiences, and I would also like you to insert yourself from your listening perspective into this as well. So can we all open up together, perhaps, to how we experience respect for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha and what is more aligned with you? We talk about refuge, but we also talk about limitlessness of the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. We bring care to and into our respect for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, maybe love, maybe some poetry, certainly some strength, some serenity. I mentioned playfulness, but also gladness, ways of gladdening the mind, pamuja, and ultimately humor in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. I recollected on some chants we chanted this morning in the Dhammapada, verse 190, the Buddha says, "One who has gone for refuge to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha sees with perfect wisdom the Four Noble Truths." See, paying respect to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is tantamount, equivalent to seeing the Four Noble Truths when we go authentically and with truth in our hearts. And I'm sure all of you know, have chanted the qualities of the Buddha. We chanted them today over and over. We chant them every time we come together. I was just wondering, can we touch into a certain resonance in our heart when we chant the characteristics of the Buddha and the characteristics of the Dhamma and the characteristics of the Sangha? Have you ever felt the presence of the Buddha, the presence of the Dhamma, the presence of the Sangha truly in your heart, internally, when you were chanting? I'm just asking that so that we can open up to that register of our experience together. And so I was just wondering if some of you would like to join in, if we could do this together as a social experiment together, if we could put our hands on our hearts and just in silence for a few moments together, if we could settle into our respect, our mutual respect, joy, happiness for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, the maybe energy, an energy of upliftment, recollecting with happiness of all the good merit we've acquired in chanting and respecting the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. What does it feel like? How does it alter the breath? How does it alter the sense of experiencing the present moment? We're looking for something subtle, something underneath the experience. Bring that into the room together. Thank you for that experiment. Once integrated and settled, respect takes on many living characteristics within us. I would describe the Buddha Dhamma Sangha for me personally as a certain inner strength. It's perhaps first a whispering, but it gains a certain strength, a certain impulse, initially to not turn away from suffering, because our impulse is to shy away from suffering, to put it under the carpet, so to speak, not to look at it. But knowing that the Buddha brought us right in front of the face of suffering and called it noble and gave us this beautiful Dhamma to experience this practice, this of encountering suffering is something that always brought me back initially to the experience of suffering, to really open up to it in all its form. And it was really my first call to become a Buddhist and to start taking the Buddha Dhamma Sangha into my heart. I believe we are joining a long line of transmissions right down from the very Buddha. From generation to generation, we are truly the sons and daughters of the Buddha when we take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. And the confidence that and inner strength that I get from my respect for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is in part power of the Buddha's own storytelling, how he tells the stories, how he teaches the Dhamma. It invites me to internalize it, to take it inside, to not leave the words of the Buddha at the doorstep, so to speak, to bring them in. In a sense, the Buddha's victory is our common humanity's victory over suffering. His victorious lion's roar of his teaching is our victorious lion's roar. The victories of his numerous disciples also touches ours as well. To hold these victorious examples in our memories should not be disrespected. It's a very important part of the practice to recall the memories of these victorious examples of the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, and to invite their support when we need it most, and to be able to open up to asking for this support through our memory is ennobling in and of itself. It's an ennobling truth that elevates us to meet and understand and dissolve our dukkha. In the Karaniya Metta Sutta, of course, the Buddha enjoins us to be saku ujucha sahujucha, so able, upright, thoroughly upright. We stand, we do not take our dukkha lying down. We stand up to it, and we stand with confidence that we have a great teacher, great teachings, and great examples. With our growing inner strength that is in line with the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, we open to a register of our own personal experience, as Bhante Sadhajiva mentioned at the end of his talk. And we open to this register. At first, it can be unsettling when we want to keep coming back, to not turn away from dukkha, to keep opening up to it. And that when we're feeling unsettled, we may have the opportunity to recognize in our own direct experience that our life was not built and will never be ours to command and ours to order as we see fit. Our desires are nothing more than, or will never be more than, passing whims, flights of fancy, crumbling ground, unstable, insecure. The Buddha investigated Tanha, the starting point of dukkha, as a sort of toxic starting point. The toxicity is when we refuse to see, and we might even choose a whole lifestyle of not seeing that we are not in control. We do not command our world. We cannot regulate our happiness from the starting point of just passing whims. We have the Buddha Dhamma Sangha in our heart, and so we know and see we cannot command our happiness as our position. We cannot claim a permanent happiness with our whims as any foundation. The Buddha says in his first teaching, in his definition of the second noble truth, tatra tatra abhinandini, he says delighting in this and that, as the Buddha describes this noble truth. We cannot pretend to rule a universe from a point of ever-changing instability. Our whims are not ours. Also, they just ride in from our minds and our hearts, from experiences we've had, from memories, from combinations of things people have already mentioned. There's a famous study where the people have been asked to state what their favorite topping on the pizza is, and they're asked, Will they believe that in 10 years? And it's a long-term study, and everyone says yes. Most of the people say yes. My favorite topping will always be the same. And everyone's topping is always different in 10 years. And then they're asked again, will your favorite topping be the same? And they always say yes. Same percentage of people, very high. No, it always changes. So our winds are always changing. We know that as Dhamma practitioners, we can watch our minds and see that it is not a place of stability in which to build our happiness. So what do we build our safety and security on? With a practice that is elevated by these noble truths, we take heart that there is an end to suffering and that it is timeless, boundless, and shared by all to carry us to the end of suffering. In the Vimamsaka Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 47, the Buddha describes a path that ends with a truth that is secure. The Buddha recommends a line of inquiry, questioning of what can be seen and heard in realized ones, like the Buddha. Through this inquiry, gradually through small steps, we are led to confirm our confidence. And this confirmed confidence is summarized as the Buddha is fully awakened, the Dhamma is well explained, the Sangha is practicing well. And so in beginning with taking refuge and having faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, we also end up and confirm that faith was well placed. And in a sense, we run full circle. So on stream entry, we drop this fetter, as Bhante Sadajiva was mentioning, of Vichikicha, of doubt, that the Buddha was fully awakened. We know that we can do it, since the Dhamma is well explained, and others are also practicing well and can serve as our guides. I like the word Vichikicha from the root language in Chikitsa here can mean like therapy and healing. So it's when we turn away from our own healing is when our doubting minds can get out of control. I also like the word da in Dhamma and Saddha, which means to carry. If we want to carry a bucket of water from point A to point B, we naturally will want to perform a check on our bucket to make sure there are no holes in it. So these analogies and these word plays are useful for a sincere practitioner in search of lasting happiness. How do we check our container for leaks so we may carry the Dhamma without losing a drop? By practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, we are practicing well. We are joining the Sangha. We take on the mantle of a noble practice. As in the Dakina Vibhanga Sutta, a life devoted to the first recognition of these first noble truths is worthy of respect. In practicing in line with this noble practice, we open up to a way of looking outwards to the external signs of transcendence in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and to include a way of looking inwards to those very self-same signs that are within us. At this point, I want to be able to convince all of you that the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is a world-ending and superlative realization that we are honored to take refuge in and attune our hearts to until that day when we are that refuge. It may help to say that we don't have to look away. We don't have to look far away at all. The Buddha Dhamma Sangha initially appears under the guise of an object to be acquired, learning how to bow, learning how to approach a monk or nun. It's something like acquisition, something to be objectified and then acquired. And soon we realize that the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is beyond all acquisition, Adi Viveka. It's beyond any type of objectivity. It is already within us, and it is the nature of reality that all beings awaken to. So in a sense, the Buddha Dhamma Sangha is that which we surrender to, that which is already there. Not a point externally, not a point of doctrine, a point of religion. It's a moment of true surrender, of a quiet inner pivot, a point of time, yes, when the path suddenly quickens in and of its own. This is how I experienced it. Instead of walking to the third noble truth as a far off place and plotting measure by measure, limit by limit, getting there, or through the Four Noble Truths as a dark and dense forest of sleepiness, anxiety, and confusion, it's suddenly a sense of being carried and the Dhamma that we are carrying within us, as if suddenly by a rocket ship, and suddenly very quick speed. This sense of quickening can be felt in the body as lightness or joy. It can also be subversive to a prior sense of the path as struggle. Some of you may have already fallen in love with the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. I'm sure some of you are able to attune to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha in a way that brings upon more easefulness and lessens dukkha. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha taught the importance of training ourselves to gladden the mind as we breathe in, and to gladden the mind as we breathe out. When asked by his monks how to gladden the mind, the Buddha gave us 10 examples. The first 3 are ways to attune our gladdening practice to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Practically speaking, we recall moments of feeling great joy in chanting and celebrating the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha on days like this. In my practice, I took it a step further. I chanted the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha over and over until the words disappeared and they became a sort of energetic presence that I could attune to quickly. And in my practice, I was able to take that sort of energy into piti, into joy, and with that as a sort of energetics, I was able to mold it into a jhana practice. So many people use metta or some other object to enter into jhana, but my first objects were these first 3 types of ways of gladdening your mind. Just looking at the Anapanasati Sutta, I chose the Buddha, characteristics of the Buddha until it was an energetic presence, the Dhamma characteristics and the Sangha characteristics. And they're very, very powerful initiators for cleansing, purifying the mind. And it's very beneficial that Bhante Sadajiva just gave a beautiful talk on the 5 hindrances, which is very helpful as a basis and a lead-in to enter into a practice to experience piti, to experience this joy. We have to drop and let go of these 5 hindrances. And let me provide just maybe a few more details of my practice. My first teacher I would come to sometimes was years ago, so laden and so wilted with the burden of caring, clinging with respect to these 5 aggregates. And my first teacher, it surprised me the first time this happened. He just beamed a smile at me when I came into him. He was authentically excited and almost celebratory and almost victorious. And I was so heavy coming into him, telling him about the suffering that was in my heart and coming through in the meditation. And he would say, I am so happy you are aware of your suffering. I am so happy you are aware of your suffering. Oh, it took my breath away. Can you see that, to the extent, he would say, can you see that to the extent that you are mindful of your suffering, you are free from that suffering? Mindfulness as freedom, mindfulness of an object. The mind is free is aware of suffering happening in it. There's a purity in that awareness. There's a chance to purify that even more. If you can see that freedom, he would say to me, pray to the Buddha, pray to the Dhamma, pray to the Sangha for more pain, so that you can see this clearer and more clearly and more clearly. And he would chuckle and laugh at his own jokes like this, but I found it extremely helpful, sort of prod, to not turn away from suffering even more, to actually turn to suffering, to open up to contact, to see that I was free at that point of contact, not limited by the contact with suffering, but liberated. So this manner of rejoicing at the mindful contact of the mind and objects of the mind perceived as suffering, it was just a shift in a view, something like humor. Humor can sort of subtly shift a perspective, a point of view. And so it got me questioning, well, how do we actually create these architectures of distance between mindfulness, between the mindfulness and the suffering objects? What is that? How do we create this distance, and how does it collapse? And so I could see that I could acquire that this was that a liberated mind was there was potential there. And so it spurred me to practice even more. So it built even more energy into my practice. And so that freedom at that point of contact comes after we have seen the futility of this perception that there's has to be distance between me and suffering for me to manage it. But we actually, when we penetrate higher into wisdom, we notice that the distance between mindfulness and the object actually collapses. We say appamado, buddho, appamado, Dhammo, appamado, sangho. So this is limitless, is the Buddha, limitless is the Dhamma, limitless is the Sangha. Man is this measurement word in Pali. It's immeasurable. And these aren't just words that we chant. We are called to actually actualize this limitlessness in this point of contact. It's the moment we realize that we have to surrender, because we realize that we cannot overcome suffering as a small little ego, as a limit. That if I do this in my practice, this will happen, then I'll have this. We're just working with small, limited things. And so it's really only through this sense of complete surrender that I cannot build my way to awakening, that I have to actually surrender to the reality of what's already here, to the limitless potential that is already here. And that was, for me, a moment when I realized that was an extraordinary quickening in my practice. And to commemorate it, I did 3 of the slowest bows I've ever done to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha to really savor that moment. Yet our natural desire is to shield against suffering. It comes naturally from how we're raised and how we live life. But it is fed by a sense of self, that we have a sense of self here, that the world is out there. We taught to locate ourself, and it changes all the time. And you can see that there's no foundation for the self, because if I have a pain in my right hip right now, well, that's definitely where I feel myself. If I'm in feeling some strong emotion in my heart, well, that would point to my heart. And so we're constantly moving our sense of self around. Oh, we take pride in our hair. Oh, we cut it off. It's constantly growing and changing. Where did our self go now? As we age, we lose our hair, we lose our features, and things change. And our sense of self change. But most people go through life not noticing that we're just moving a sense of self from location to location, and that there's no fundamental structure there. There's just a movement. There's just a redesignation happening. Just a labeling activity. So our strategy to find security fabricates a location for a self that is constantly on the move. Here one second, there another. So how can we ever possibly attain perfect mental health, perfect health in the Dhamma with such frantic movement? And I think where we can find some clues on how to work with these things is actually through this hasapanya. And so that's why I wanted to bring this out a little more. Where does laughter not enter in your life? Have you ever thought to approach the Dhamma from that perspective? Where do you feel that you cannot smile? Where is there a point of seriousness? Where is there so much clinging that you cannot bring a smile? It's a good way to investigate dukkha, because dukkha can be very, very subtle. So we want to investigate by asking these questions until we can sort of sense into a sense of stuckness. There might be something sticky or sullen, or heavy or damp, or contracted or clenched or clung to in our experience. In other words, what won't laugh right now? And one way to turn towards suffering, to open up to its liberation, because we can only liberate from suffering when we turn towards it. And so humor is a way of seeing afresh from a new perspective, somewhat unexpected and relatively detached. somewhat playful, as I've said. And these qualities are also coextensive with any Buddhist insight, any jnana that you're going to have. There are also these characteristics in a true insight. Can you think of other creative ways in that you might, sort of as the Buddha says, condense these teachings, liberation from dukkha? As we work with the Buddha's line of inquiry, aspects of life that once appeared grim and darkened begin to lift with an increasing sense of freedom, joy, and illumination. What was more immediately noticeable was the sort of engagement with a humorous mode of questioning for me, and it was a sort of glue that kept me coming back to the cushion and invigorated my practice. So how does the humorous mode fit in line with the Dhamma? In our time remaining, I'm hoping to explore how humor is compatible with sincere and deep devotional Buddhist practice, and also a true and natural function or characteristic of release itself. As we heard in Dhammapada 190 at the beginning, it is tantamount to seeing the Four Noble Truths. So let's establish that the Buddha's humor is not vulgar. It's truly noble. It's respectful. It's in line with the Four Noble Truths. There's a beautiful tradition across our Buddhist globe showing statues and images of the Buddha, often with a very slight smile or a gentle smile, just a hint of a smile that conveys a sort of absolute and unwavering freedom, freedom from suffering, unshakable. And now the Pali canon obviously portrays the Buddha sometimes as serious. The Buddha, of course, practiced long years of austerity until he discovered the Noble Eightfold Path. So a truer reflection of Buddha's perhaps smile is a sort of middle way smile, free of the extremes of humorlessness, but also free of indulgence, especially excessive indulgence. In the Dhammapada verse 200, the Buddha praises supreme joy. He says, "Happy indeed we live, we who possess nothing. Feeders on joy we shall be, like the radiant God. Susukang vata jivama, yesai no nati kinchana, piti bhaka bhavisama, deva avasara yata." So this is very resonant for us. Feeders on joy we shall be, like the radiant gods. We also find just as frequently a Buddha who cautions us against excessive laughter. In the Dhammapada verse 146, the Buddha chastises or prods, rather, excessive indulgence in humor with questions like, why is there laughter? Why is there joy when the world is always burning, shrouded in darkness? Why not seek the light? So how can we account for these two seemingly opposing views? The Buddha Sangha, however, was not grim. It was not joyless. You only have to look as far as the Vinaya to see stories of the monks' laughter, so much so that the Buddha was required to come up with, the Vinaya is code of conduct, sorry, for the monks and nuns. And so the Buddha had to establish rules about excessive laughter and inappropriate humor. In the Pachitya rule, we find in laughing excessively when showing one's teeth, there is an offense of wrongdoing. So this Vinaya rule, we should note, only prohibits a certain type of excessive laughter, not all forms. Some show a lack of mindfulness and a lack of self-restraint, but others do not. Some show a kind of wisdom, taking us back to hasapanya, the wisdom, the laughter wisdom. And so in my searches of the Pali Canon, I found many words for laughter, but some of them I had to look in the Vinaya rather than just the suttas. So the first one is sita, which is a subtle smile that can sort of be present on the lips or not, but it comes across as a sort of relaxed facial feature. And hassa or hasita, the combination of hassa and sita, can be a slight, quickly raising smile where you make a sort of puffing ha sound, ha, like smile like this. And then there are other degrees of laughter that can be progressively greater and greater, where there's less and less self-control. So a laughter that erupts from the heart and can shake the body. And then there's a full laugh that can make one stand up and scream and laugh and cry. And then there's even a greater one where you can just completely lose control and laugh and frolic around. The Buddha and his disciples engage only in the first two, so sita, the smile, and the hasa, or the hasita. This is in line with what we would expect, owing to the refinement of mind of arahants who are fully freed from mental defilements and afflictive emotions. You can find typologies of Buddha's humor in scholarly work that, if you're interested, but I wanted to delve in a little bit deeper to the sort of awakening potential, the characteristics, the wisdom characteristics in laughter. The Buddha used humor, absurdity, even slight mockery in his teachings to counter fixed and dogmatic views, and to highlight certain human foibles. In the Chulasaka Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 35, the Buddha engages in a discussion with a man by the name of Saccaka, very boastful debater who claims he can defeat anyone in argument. In fact, he goes on and on with great details. I don't see any ascetic or Brahmin who would not shake and rock and tremble and sweat in the armpits, were I to take them on in debate. And then he goes on so far to say, is even if they were a post in the ground, insentient and incapable of feeling whatsoever, that post would shake, it would rock, and it would tremble, having to debate Saccaka. And so you can see the buildups in the potential of the storytelling here. And so the debate centers around whether happens the five aggregates of clinging, so form, feeling, perception, sankharas, and consciousness, are self. Of course, Saccaka claims that they are, because he's just countering the Buddha. And this debate is an absolute true gem, and it truly highlights the liberative power of laughter. When we suddenly wake up from the misperception, like Saccaka, that that this body, this form, is not myself. It's such a convincing argument. The humorous mode in this sutta is underscored by all the repetitions of the Saccaka's boastfulness. And so we see a lot of repetition in the Pali Canon, and people often wonder why there's so much repetition. Some of it, yes, is to memorize the teachings because they were passed down orally, but some of it is necessary part of Buddhist humor. And a very subtle aspect of Buddhist humor is an artful ability to create a storytelling container which can initiate, generate, and build and develop joy, piti, that reflects and mimics the artful ability of a practitioner who one day will take up an object like piti, like joy, in samadhi, in jhana practice. I do recommend spending time with reflecting on the suttas and noticing the qualities that the Buddha uses in storytelling to build the energetic capacity to hold joy. And you can see that in your worship practice, your devotional practice for the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. It's also a way of building our energetic container to hold more joy so that we can enter and exit jhana more easily. Of the five factors of the first jhana, certainly the path factor of joy, or piti, can be so powerful it eclipses all the other path factors. With a sort of middle way smile and a balanced understanding of humor, it's we generally won't get carried away with the joyful ecstasies of the first two jhanas. I have facilitated retreats for other Buddhist teachers from other Buddhist traditions who are not trained in our Theravadan tradition. In one recent retreat, I saw people actually laughing out loud and rolling around when they suddenly got the cosmic joke. And I think our culture, as I was just walking Theravada culture of tempering humor in the way that the Buddha's sort of use of description sort of slowly builds the energy of piti, and we learn how to slowly build and control. We don't completely let go into the ecstasy of jhana, but we just temper it enough to hold it. And we actually realize that this tempering of the piti actually builds it even more, builds our capacity. It takes time to build the capacity to really hold the first jhana for a very long time, for example. And so the Buddha called his religion the Dhamma Vinaya. I mean, it's the balance of self-restraint and control and the joy of the Dhamma. The two come together. And we need both these sides to actually build a very positive experience, to keep us coming back to the cushion, to keep investigating. A good example of this is in the Wailing Sutta. Some of you may know it, Runa Sutta. We find both kinds of humor, the excessive kind and the middle way kind, the Vinaya kind and the Dhamma kind. So to elevate humor to its noble and ennobling and liberating potential, the Buddha began by setting aside what's not liberating about humor. So he says, singing is regarded as wailing in the noble Vinaya, or discipline of the monks. Dancing is regarded as madness. Laughing excessively, showing of teeth, this reminds us of the Pachitya rule in the Vinaya, is childish. Then the Buddha doesn't stop there. He says, so monks, setting aside song and dance, it is enough to smile. When you are thoroughly pleased by the Dhamma 100 times over, and having smiled, it's enough to say that there is just smiling. This is a very deep teaching, and so I wanted to talk about this phrasing, alang sitang sitamattaya, that the Buddha, of course, was a master wordsmith, so he chose this word smiling, sita, because it also means coolness. The Buddha chose to associate smiling with nibbana, which conveys a sense of coolness, of having extinguished a flame. This coolness is also one of dispassion, viraga. It is the sign that one has crossed over, it is one has gone beyond birth and death. So this, and by the way, when the Buddha debated, he was sometimes asked to show his armpits, or he would show his armpits to show that he was not sweating, that he was actually cool in debate. And so the Buddha says, when you have trained in such a way, and so this expression is also reminiscent of another very advanced teaching that some of you may know, the Bahia Sutta, and Bhante Sadajiva just quoted from it, Dite Dita Matang. So the Buddha gave a very terse teaching on how to awaken fully. He said, in the seen is just the seen, and the heard is just the heard, and the sensed is just the sensed, and the cognized is just the cognized. And this is very reminiscent, in this expression, it's the same type of expression, sitang sitamataya. In the smile is just smile. So we often have a tendency when we experience piti or joy in our practice to actually want to consume it. You will have a memory of a joyful experience, or we'll start fantasizing about another. That's consuming it, it's transforming that piti into something that it is not. We're always transforming whatever given we have in front of us into something that it is not. We're often consuming it in that way, and it also consumes what is generating the piti, paradoxically. And so the experience of piti or joy will often just end in and of itself because we're consuming it through a fantasy. It's too low for that energy. But if we refrain from that fantasy, if we refrain from thinking, if we just experience the piti as it is, the smile just is just the smile. If we can internalize that, we can actually generate and hold a sense of piti that can take us into a very strong jhana. Another example of this ultimate sort of smiling wisdom that I ultimately wanted to get to is the Anupada Sutta that I mentioned earlier. This idea of hasapanya, or laughter wisdom, of getting the cosmic joke, not taking the world's bait. I think this it's an incredibly powerful teaching, but the Buddha is actually describing how Sariputta had the ability to enter and remain in very refined states of jhana and to notice the impermanent mental object of each factor arising and passing away. And that's truly remarkable. It's truly awe-inspiring. And when you read the sutta, if you have an appreciation for the practice of others, if you're capable of mudita, of this sympathetic joy, of empathizing, of really being happy for the successes of other people's practice, you can really internalize that excitement. And it can, reading that sutta alone can, if you truly read it with a simple and humble heart, and admiring the qualities of Sariputta, it can take you right into these very deep experiences of joy and lead to, of course, to hasapanya, this sort of laughter wisdom, this unshakable ability to carry wisdom wherever you go, in whatever circumstances. So let's see, I just unaware of the time right now, so I wanted to perhaps bring things to a close at this point, and let you all know that you know, to sort of take a moment of refreshment maybe in our practice, and to take some subtle clues on the Buddhist humor, to actually engage with looking at things from a different perspective. As often at the end of having heard a Dhamma talk, many of his monks were just delighted. Abhinandunti, they say. Many of the listeners were just overjoyed with happiness, having heard. And so this excitement being over the top, we don't want to spend it, like I said before, on something external. We want to build our capacity to hold that joy within us. And so I wanted to encourage you to also see things from a different perspective, maybe in your practice, something the way how a joke kind of works with us. We see suddenly the world from a different perspective. There's a play on words or a pun or a change of image, and suddenly we just, that sense of laughter, you know, it's having a sense of refreshment, seeing things from a different perspective. And so it invites us to use our own ingenuity. It's about internalizing this, bringing this into our own practice, and seeing simple things like worshiping the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha from a completely different perspective, seeing their liberating potential, and bringing that into our hearts as much as we can. And so I often say that the third Brahma Vihara, the Mudita Brahma Vihara, is the more interesting Brahma Vihara for me. And it's when you'll find the fewest amount of teachings on. And yet it being able to open up to the beautiful, and I invite you all to reflect on the life of the Buddha that has been brought down to us. It is storytelling at its finest moments, that it is there to build our piti, to build our joy, to build our energy, to build our refreshment. It is an infinite source of energy for our practice. I invite you to investigate the Buddha's lives and to investigate his Dhamma as well. Even all those lists and all the repetitions, they're all there just to build this sort of excitement and this joy and refreshment, to see things from different perspectives. And you start simplifying in your heart more and more. You can hear all these lists, but you start to realize where they all come together. And we begin to see it in our own experience. We begin to see it with our own eyes, as Bhante Sadaji was said, to internalize it, to bring it into our hearts. And so this is the Dhamma gift I'm offering for you today. And may it be for you and the benefit of all beings. And may we all grow in wisdom, and may you all attain the ultimate fruit of Nibbana.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you all for staying on today. The bitter end. It's lovely to be with you. I usually take I'm used to doing Q&As, but there's no